Welcome to the Board of Education's November 9th, 2022 regular session meeting. Please stand as we observe a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Triplett. Several board members will be attending the TSBA Leadership Conference and Annual Convention tomorrow through Sunday, and I know we all look forward to interacting with board members across the state. As announced Monday night, a policy review meeting will be held on Friday, November 18th at 9 a.m. in this boardroom. Also, since we will not have another board meeting until December, I wanted to wish all of our students, families, and staff a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, as Knox County Schools will be closed Wednesday, November 23rd through Friday, November 25th. Also, if this is your first time attending a board meeting, please just be aware of our board policy B230 that outlines the expectations at our meetings, so please be respectful and courteous. This is the only time we have to meet as an elected body to discuss items, so if you do need to discuss something with someone else in the room, we ask that you step outside to do so. So with all of that being said, board members, there's a packet of documents at your seat from Ms. Bike that she will be discussing on item 9B. And also, Ms. Bike has withdrawn item 9C, the Student Success Committee, from the agenda. So are there any other requested changes to this agenda? So we have a motion by Ms. Horn and a second by Ms. Henderson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Coatney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 5A, consent agenda.
Motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 6A, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-351, credit recovery as amended.
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Owen, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7A, approve Tennessee Department of Education Safe Schools Grant in the amount of $1,621,363.61 with required local match of $483,330.
Motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Chief Perriard is still here. Chief was able to find the answer related to the matching fund requirement. I just wanted him to speak to that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board. The match is basically in-kind services we're able to designate through our SRO partners at KCSO and KPD. So that's how we meet that requirement. So no money comes out of the general budget for that.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. Horn and a second by Ms. Henderson. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7B, approve Tennessee Department of Education Literacy Training Teacher Stipend Grant in the amount of $379,000.
Motion by Mr. Watson, second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7C, approve Tennessee Department of Education Best for All District Grant in the amount of $339,357.82.
A A motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7D, approve Tennessee Department of Education Resilient School Communities Grant in the amount of $163,062.41.
Motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7E, approve revised memoranda of understanding with the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Tennessee Valley in support of their Tennessee Department of Education 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant applications and grant funding for multiple Knox County schools extended learning programs up to $319,224.87.
Motion by Ms. Owen, a second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7F, approve Tennessee Arts Commission student ticket subsidy grants in the total amount of $56,270 for 27 Knox County schools.
Motion by Ms. Owen, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7G, approve Town of Farragut grants in the amount of $108,000 for Farragut Primary, Farragut Intermediate, Farragut Middle, and Farragut High schools.
Motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7H, approve Walmart Community Foundation grant in the amount of $1,000 for Hardin Valley Academy.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7I, approve Office Depot donation in the total amount of $40,783.31 for Inskip Elementary School.
Motion by Ms. Owen, second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7J, approve Tennessee Foundation for Agriculture in the Classroom grant in the amount of $500 for Carnes Middle School.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7K, approve Great Smoky Mountains National Park travel grant in the amount of $200 for Mount Olive Elementary School.
Motion by Reverend Butler, a second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7L, approve Guitar Center Foundation grants in the amount of $10,000 for Vine Magnet Middle School and Austin East Magnet High School.
Motion by Reverend Butler, a second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8A, approve design contract with Design Innovation Architects for partial roof replacements at Pleasant Ridge and Ritta Elementary Schools at a cost of $117,000.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8B, approve contract with Life Safety Inspections LLC for provision of kitchen, hood, exhaust, and fire suppression inspections up to $35,000 annually for the term of January 1 through December 31, 2023, which may be extended for an additional 4 years, 1 year at a time.
Motion by Ms. Owen, second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8C, approve contracts with Consolidated Electronic Systems, Gallagher and Associates, and System Integrations Incorporated for provision of intercom installation and repair services up to $300,000 annually for the term of January 1 through December 31, 2023, which may be extended for an additional 4 years, 1 year at a time.
Motion by Ms. Owen, second by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9A, Emerald Academy Charter School Evaluation Report.
Motion by Ms. Horn, second by Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9B, discussion and possible action on resolution supporting students and teachers by requesting the Tennessee General Assembly amend the Tennessee Code Annotated Section 49-6-3115 to allow school districts to make retention decisions for 3rd and 4th grade students.
Would we not have to have a motion to approve? Before we have a motion, okay. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, we do have public forum speakers on this agenda item. Allie Cohen? Allie?
She's on her way.
Okay. Let's see. Next. Angel Jones. If you could just state your name and county of residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Angel Jones. I don't know if it would be easier to hear me. I'm just going to read the email that I wrote earlier to all the school board members. My name is Angel Jones. I'm from Knox County. I have 2 kids who attend Knox County schools, one of whom is a 3rd grader this year. I am here now talking to you about the resolution that Catherine Bright brought forward in regards to the new state law, TCA 49-6-3115. Please support the resolution that she has put forward because a single test shouldn't determine whether a student should pass a grade or not. It should be a decision between students, teachers, and their parents. Teachers watch these students grow all year long. They see their improvements, they see where they need help, and one test cannot see everything that a student has been doing all year long. My 3rd grader received first honors, straight A's this last 9 weeks. I can't imagine what it would be like if she kept up that amazing hard work all school year long and then to have a bad day on one single test that could say that she might need to do summer school or that she needs to repeat a grade because of it. It just does not make any sense. And it doesn't just affect mine, it affects all children in our county and children across the entire state. Not only are the students affected, but teachers are affected by this as well. We have so many fantastic teachers, and this is a lot of stress to put onto our teachers and to put onto our students over a single test to determine whether they should go on or not. The state law will harm our students, teachers, and all of us. Knox County School Board of Education, you guys need to join with all the rest of the school boards throughout Tennessee that are calling on the General Assembly to amend TCA 49-6-3115 to allow retention to be based upon all school district information on each student, not just one test. So please support Catherine Bike's proposed resolution tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Candace Bannister. Hello. State your
Hi.
name and county of residence.
Candace Bannister, Knox County Schools. I'm coming to you all tonight as a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade teacher. I taught 25 years. Only those grades, and 17 of those years were here in Knox County Schools. I have big concerns about this 3rd grade retention law because in my first year of teaching, and remember it was my first year, we had a hard, fast rule at our school or in our district that children who did not meet a certain requirement would be retained. I discussed this with the parent throughout the year because there were concerns at the end of the year that child did not meet that requirement, they had to be retained. I had no say. The school had no say. The parent was told. The last day that report card went home and said the child was retained, and that parent was furious. She could not accept it, she would not support it, and in that case, that's not going to help that child. So we need to have a say where parents have a voice. Parents cannot be told something this big and not have any way to work through it, do better, have a chance. It just doesn't work. So I think it's important that we ask our legislature to revise this to allow some input from parents, teachers, and local assessments. The other thing is, the earlier an intervention takes place, the more successful it's going to be. Many data points support this. Retaining a child at the end of 3rd grade is a little too late to capture what they could have learned beginning in kindergarten. Our interventions start in kindergarten. If a child has been in intervention in kindergarten and 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade, we already know probably how that child is going to be doing on that test. So I know Mr. Myers mentioned the other night that if they're suspected to have a disability or they have a disability, it won't affect them. But if we have a child that has participated in intervention for 4 years, I don't see how we think that that means that child is in the lowest percentage of the grade level band. How are they going to have a chance to pass this test? So, used to, in the old days, when I first started teaching in Knox County schools, we had a thing called transition, and it was between kindergarten and first grade. And I don't know what the decision for that was. I wasn't ever asked to participate in that, but there were children there that were given another year to do a little bit better and be a little bit prepared for first grade. If we're going to consider holding children back, I think it needs to be a joint decision, but it also needs to be earlier in their school career. Third grade is too late to do it. Our legislators are trying to do something because they're concerned about our reading levels, and I certainly understand that, but it's too late to do something to be helpful by that time. So I would just ask that you say, hey, we need to look back at this and come up with some better solutions. There are some, but it will probably take more than 3 days, and it will probably take the help of educators and those who do this job on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker on this topic, Lisa McLeod. So state your name and county of residence. Thank you.
My name is Lisa McLeod. I live in Knox County in Knoxville. I have a third grader who goes to Dogwood Elementary School. I have several other kids in middle school. My child goes to Dogwood Elementary. I find them to be an amazing school. We have gotten as a family so much support from the staff and the teachers there. And I believe that that's the place where these kind of decisions need to be made. They need to be made with parents, they need to be made with educators, they need to be made with staff. And our schools can do this. I've had kids that have been in the RTI program. I've had kids who have gotten extra help in learning to read or doing their math. And I think that we have a school system that can do this job, and we don't need the legislature making blanket decisions about kids in one area in their English language proficiency on one test. I also have a child who lives with me who's an English language learner. She's now in middle school, but in third grade, she may not have been able to pass this test. So I just think there need to be other ways for us to figure this out and not just a single blanket test in one snapshot in time. I also have children who have trauma histories, and we know that a lot of our kids do. And kids with trauma histories have good days and bad days, just like every other kid, but oftentimes their good days are much better and their bad days are really bad. And I think that just a single test is too much, especially for 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did Allie ever make it back in? No? Okay. Okay.
So have you read the item? So we will need a motion and a second for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So do we want to make a motion to approve it and get a second before?
Ish. Instead of the motion on the agenda, I'm making a different motion for the board to adopt the resolution with the revisions made by Dr. Norton.
So are the revisions?
They're not, we don't have them, but from our discussion, it seemed like that we could get there on Monday.
Ms. Owen?
I'd like to make a substitute motion to put this off until December so that we could more thoroughly consider. Can I second the first one and then make the substitute? You got it. Second the first motion and a substitute to put it off until December.
Okay. So we'll need a second for that.
I'll second that.
So we have a substitute motion to defer this until December and come back with a written resolution that includes
It seemed like if Dr. Norton is not the correct person, but a recommendation from someone within that.
So, Dr. Norton can, okay, all right. So, any discussion? Reverend Butler?
So will it be enough, how does that affect the time process?
I think if the question is how it would affect the time process as far as making it to the legislature in time, that should be fine. Their session starts mid-January. So if we vote on this at the beginning of December, assuming we would pass it at that time, then we would have plenty of time to get our legislative priorities to the legislature.
I'm trying to look to see who's next here because Mr. McMillan, I think it is you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. If this should not pass, or for whatever reason, then things remain the way they are now with, like the lady said, them trying to intervene at whenever their earliest date is, that sort of stuff. I guess, I don't know whether the superintendent could answer that or anybody that has knowledge of it.
You want to take it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. So my understanding, and you may want to jump in, Gary, my understanding is that this resolution, I think, and I think Ms. Pike has provided some from maybe Williamson County, Anderson County, some other ones that are there as well. So this resolution, I think, would just go, if passed, to the legislators like some other ones have, and then it still would take action, obviously, by the legislator to change the current law. But as we're currently operating under the current law, which would mean that if nothing changes when they go back into session, then any student in third grade who's not proficient would be retained. Kind of no questions asked. The two choices being they could go to the summer program or tutoring in their fourth grade year. And then again, not to get too far in the weeds, that would be if they're approaching, then they get that choice of either or. If they're in the bottom bracket, which is below, they would have to do both of those in order to not be retained in third grade. So it would still take that legislative action. I think this would just be this body saying that they want the legislators to consider that. So if nothing happens and nothing happens in Nashville, then it would go into effect this summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important to point out that the resolution that's being asked for is not asking for the legislature to rescind the law, but actually just modify the law and modify what the students are assessed on. Ms. Owen, I do have a question about your substitute motion. So when you say this, I want to define what that means, because I know we've had conversations about making this a part of our legislative priorities. This is a separate resolution, so I want to be clear. Are we talking about creating a separate resolution in addition to our legislative priorities? And if so, is there pros and cons to elevating this to a separate resolution versus keeping it as a part of our overall legislative priorities if the board should approve to?
That question got complex fast. My motion was to defer this motion to consider this resolution until December.
Okay.
The legislative priorities would be separate. To the next part of your question, is there a reason to have both? I think yes. When it's on the legislative priorities, usually it's just a little paragraph that says this is what, these are our priorities. And of course, this falls in with the priorities that we have had in the past as far as local control and parental input and that kind of thing, appropriate testing, all of those things that we've talked about in the past. I think having it laid out as a resolution that would be both separate and combined in that is advantageous because it makes a little bit of a stronger statement to the legislature about our beliefs that this should be controlled locally. So does that begin to answer your question?
Our legislative priorities last year had something on this issue, but it was 2 sentences, where a resolution is a little bit more involved in that. I also remember that in our conversation around legislative priorities last year, there was a little bit of frustration, at least from myself, and I think a few other board members, that we were really kind of being asked to approve those at the first time we were also seeing them. I mean, obviously, we got them a week ahead of time, but we had no prior discussion related to them. So I'd like to see, is there anything in the calendar right now where we're going to have some prior discussion before we actually are being asked to vote on those priorities? Because what we've tried to do for the last 2 years is kind of edit in a meeting, which is never great. We actually aren't very effective at that, and I don't know anybody that is. You just can't do group editing like that. So I would suggest that, I know this is a part of that conversation, is that somehow we figure out a process to start pulling our ideas together that would be representative in that document when we see it, instead of 1 or 2 people having their ideas that everybody sees and says, oh, but my idea didn't get considered. So I think there should be a process established with that, and I think that coincides with this conversation too, because we probably don't want to edit this resolution in a room together as well in this type of meeting. So.
Well, and typically we have people send their suggestions and ideas and wishes into Ms. Coatney, right? Because outside of a public meeting, we really can't discuss it. So, I mean, that's been the process in the past, correct, Mr. Dupler? How we usually.
Yeah.
So.
Do we, Ms. Coatney, do we know when that will be sent out this year for people to start submitting their considerations?
A time has not been set this year, Mr. Watson. With a new superintendent, that will be probably something that he and Ms. Christie would want to, talk about that timeline, since it has been so difficult.
But the intent would be
with COVID and everything the last couple.
The intent would to try to be approved legislative priorities at the December meeting, correct?
I think traditionally it's done in January, if I'm not mistaken. I believe last year it was on the first week of January.
It's been done a variety of times. I think they could be discussed certainly at the December meeting. I was going to suggest maybe pulling together what we can in time for policy review.
And I would imagine it would be fine with Ms. Coatney for people to start sending them any time. Would you? I mean, no. I mean, I don't think it's too early to start working on them to, start sending them in, so she can start collecting that for us. That way, she's not pressured last minute too to get it all out. And
I know the policy review meeting is technically reserved for policies. This is not necessarily a policy. Is it okay if we have a starting discussion at this meeting on Friday? Is that kosher, if it's a part of the public agenda that's released?
Mr. Dupler, that would be a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson, I mean, the policy review meeting was meant to be an informal discussion. It's not one with a lot of formalities. So if there were such a discussion on the agenda, I mean, it would certainly be allowed. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Bite.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like a chance to explain the little packet that I left for everyone that Ms. Terry helped me with. So 2 resolutions are included in this packet. One is from Williamson County that was done, I think the Williamson one was in August of 2022, and the other one is Anderson County, which I think is for sure more relevant for us, and that one was done September of 2022. And they essentially ask for the same things that we're asking for, except this time we are adding. But I also included the frequently asked questions, and one of the things that concerns me on this one is item 6. How does a school district make a promotion decision for a 3rd grade student who does not have a score on the ELA portion of the TCAP? And as I understand this, parents and guardians who opt out their children from testing, they would get an automatic, essentially fail and have to go into this program. That's how I understand that. And I think This is also just, this frequently asked question is a really good thing. I've also included the 2 cited documents from the resolution. And then lastly, I have, with the permission of a parent, which this was a little last minute, so forgive me on what it looks like. All the information has been redacted. This student is a current Knox County Schools 3rd grade student. They do not have an IEP or a 504, and the parent has been told that the student does not qualify for them. And you can see down in the bottom right, the composite score is a 28. This student has full family support, a full support system, attended preschool, does after-school things. And this is kind of one of the things of, if we're seeing this example so quickly, I really just did this today, I think about students that don't have a full support system, don't have 2 parents or guardians in the household, and didn't attend preschool, don't have all that extra stuff, and that's part of the heart of what's coming from this that I think we really need to consider. So, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The notes I made back to the conversation that when you were discussing, Mr. Watson, the legislative priorities last year, and this would be something I can send to Ms. Coatney, but kind of to your point about it, we did include it last year in the legislative priorities, so definitely would want to include it in that overall large document in addition. And then, Ms. Bike, I appreciate the frequently asked questions that you included, because the other... Yeah, and the other note that I had for Dr. Norton is I know that in July the state board passed or ruled on, has several rules. So if you would, as you're looking at what we should consider, if you'll just look at what Ms. Bike has provided here from the DOE and just see if there's anything else that we would need to be aware of, because there were several caveats to students that had been in ELL for 2 years and blah, 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 all that. So if there's anything in addition that you feel like we should know, if you'll just let us know that, even when we discuss it in December, that'd be great. Thank you.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're sort of discussing this, I'd like to ask Dr. Roswick a question about staffing. And it's basically the question I asked last time. When we're looking at the numbers of new teachers we would need to cover this, I think we've looked at, clearly they're not going to 4th grade, so those 4th grade teachers could come down. Have we looked at how many additional related arts teachers we would need to be able to cover that 3rd grade rotation?
Thank you, Ms. Owen. No, I mean, we haven't done that calculation to see what that would look like. Again, not knowing for sure how many would be retained and how many would, move forward with doing. So if we did, worst case scenario and it was 2,600, nobody did any of the interventions, I think we'd have to look at that. So I think the biggest challenge, I think maybe Dr. Wilson might have said this, or maybe he and I talked about this afterwards, I don't remember, but might be those jumps when you move to middle school and or high school. You'd have a very small class one year and a very large class in an 8th grade or a very large class in a 5th grade moving in, and potentially the receiving middle or high school would have a very little incoming class. I mean, you would see that would happen there too. So I think there would be multiple places over multiple years that there could be a huge impact on those kinds of things, but we haven't done that analysis to that detail.
My thinking is that when that 3rd grade class gets larger initially, it wouldn't make sense necessarily to hire more related arts teachers for the whole school because they are in that one rotation, but then that makes the classes double the size for all of those teachers for 3rd grade, and then as each grade goes up. So eventually, it could make a difference.
Good, that's a great point. I mean, there would definitely, we would have to be creative with, if that large volume was retained, we'd have to be creative. I don't know if we create 2 different sections of that and 2 different 3rd grade sections, but it would, especially in larger schools, I think it'd be a major challenge.
Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, a question for Dr. Roswick. I know there was several comments on Monday about the fact that this is one data point around TCAP testing. Can you speak to, or have somebody speak to, what is that TCAP testing actually measuring? Because, you know, there's a little bit difference between ability to read and literacy. If you can speak to what it's actually designed to measure, because I think the intent is that this is supposed to tell us if a kid can read or not. And I want to hear, is that really what the test is designed to measure?
Thank you, Mr. Watson. That's a great question. I actually will let Dr. Norton explain. I have a working knowledge, but I'll let her get into the strands of reading if she wants to. So
Right.
the skills for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the board. Thank you for this very detailed question. I was pulling up the assessment blueprints. So essentially, when we think about the ELA TCAP in third grade versus, say, our Ames Web assessment, the ELA version of the TCAP tests our standards. It tends to assess mostly our comprehension standards versus like decoding, because that's something that's not as easy to assess on that type of assessment. That is the place where we would see sort of those, what we call constrained skills, so the skills that you learn and then once you know them, they're done. We see that more on our Ames Web assessment that we give. So phonological awareness for kids, phonics, their sort of oral reading fluency, those things are not assessed on a third grade TCAP assessment. What we do see on the third grade TCAP assessment is the ability of a student to read and comprehend and be able to answer standards-based questions related to the text that they get on that assessment. So you're going to see whether or not they can find the main idea. You're going to see if they're able to connect details, all based on reading a third grade passage.
So based on the description that you just gave, if we are only basing retention on that one data point, we're kind of missing half the story in terms of whether or not a child can read and to what degree they can read. Is that correct? Is that fair?
So there would be sort of an assumption that if you can read the third grade passage,
Right.
that you do have the oral reading fluency skills needed to do the first layer of decoding.
Right.
It is measuring more that second strand, though, which is the
Right.
ability to comprehend that text.
Right.
What it doesn't do is give us nuance in terms of how much that text is weighing in on the student's ability to comprehend that text. So a
Right.
large part of reading comprehension is also the knowledge you bring to that text.
Yeah.
So there are missing components in that assessment, surely, in terms of the overall picture of a student's reading ability.
Yeah, and, you know, I like things easy myself, and I would love to be able to point to any one piece of data and say, you know, well, this person can do this because this data point versus they can't do this. And I think what I'm hearing is that it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
And to the degree that we have the opportunity to access more information to make that decision, we might make a better decision.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so is there any other discussion? Okay, so we have a substitute motion by Ms. Owen and a second by Ms. Spike to defer consideration of this resolution until December with amendments from Assistant Superintendent Norton included. Does that sound correct? All right, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9C was withdrawn. Item 9D, approved school zone for new Northwest Sector Elementary School.
Madam Chair, we do have a public speaker on this item. Mr. Anthony Peters. Please state your name and county of residence. Welcome.
Hey, it's me, Anthony Peters from Knox County. Could you please look at your zoning maps on your laptops? I wasn't allowed to bring a visual aid for this. First of all, I want to say I'm not from Hayden Hills. I don't want a special exemption for my child. I want a safe and effective commute from my house to a school that can teach my children. And I don't feel like the proposed plan does that. This is a quote from an article by Vinay Simlot that was published last month. Over the next 20 years, Knox County leaders expect more than 75,000 people to move into the county. The county's in the process of developing a plan for land use and transportation. Chief Engineer Jim Snowden said Hardin Valley is a good example of why this plan is necessary. This is a quote by Chief Engineer Jim Snowden. Development happened quickly, and there weren't enough roads for redundant routes through Hardin Valley. Developers filled in holes where all these potential traffic routes could have been built. The roads now are not really accommodating for the kind of growth that we did see. Now, the main problem that I have with this zone, if you guys are looking at it, is that it's ignoring the only one redundant route that we do have that services this entire yellow blip on the west side of Pellissippi, and that's Swafford Road. It services all these people out here on the lake, including those on Couch Mill and Gwen. Okay, this route takes you right down and drops you right off at Hardin Valley Road. What this proposed zoning says is let's take everybody that was using that route and funnel them onto Solway Road. Okay, that's a 2-lane highway. That means 1 lane going and 1 lane coming. Everybody from this whole area will be using Solway Road. And if you want to avoid that traffic, maybe you'll continue to use Swafford and pass right by the school that you're getting rezoned from, contributing to traffic from both schools. This is an issue that myself and my wife have been bringing up since the very first community meeting that Dr. Adams held, and it doesn't seem to have been addressed. So there's another thing I wanted to mention, that there's massive apartment complex construction right here in the corner. If you look where Hardin Valley meets Pellissippi, on the bottom corner, there's 3 massive apartment complexes, and they're not done building them. There's the Greystone Summit, has 156 units. There's the Icon with almost 300 units, and the Enclave with 236 units. These apartments have a minimum lease as little as 3 months. Most of them you can start at 6 months and get the same rate as you would for a long-term lease. Most people moving to this area, the 75,000 that Jim Snowden's talking about, are going to be coming to these apartments probably. Not everyone can afford a baseline price of $500,000 for a single home residence. A month ago, y'all asked Dr. Adams to reconsider the zoning, and he came back with the exact same zoning plus 1 finger. That's your term. And I don't think that reconsideration was worthy of your request, and I don't think that it's going to solve the problems. Right now, Hardin Valley is being used as the example of what Knox County does not want to do, and you have an opportunity to change that with this decision. It's going to affect the traffic, the commute times, everything. So I urge you to reconsider.
Thank you. That concludes public forum for this item.
All right. So do we have a motion and a second for this item? So a motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? Okay. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak to a conversation that I had with a principal that's affected by the zoning. And I thought she brought up a good point. I think actually our speaker just made a similar point too, is that, my intent is not to lay blame. I think it's to just articulate what we're dealing with. Hardin Valley was not developed in a smart way. It just wasn't. And there's no one person that made that decision or caused that issue, but it just didn't. It just blew up overnight, and we weren't ready to deal with it. And we now are seeing the trickle-down effect of that with a zoning proposal that is difficult and hard and is not going to address every issue that folks have. And I would just encourage those who have more control over development decisions in our community to also strongly consider the impacts, not just of today, but also in the future on what our school plans may be, to really be thinking about traffic patterns and infrastructure and the types of residences, because Knox County Schools always gets to the game late in terms of development by the nature of the beast, right? We're the last ones in, right? And we're also the ones that end up ticking a lot of people off because of that. And so nobody's going to be happy with whatever decision that we make, and I get that. I just want those who have been affected by these in these communities that are affected by this decision to understand that I honestly don't think we as a board or the district as a whole is negating your concerns or discounting them. I think we are trying to come up with a reasonable solution that addresses Knox County's school problem, which is overcrowding, and having to work with a less than ideal condition to solve that problem. I mean, I just think that's important to hear, and yeah, so.
All right, thank you, Mr. Watson. So we have a motion by Ms. Horn and a second by Ms. Henderson. Ms. Henderson.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Watson for those comments. I share the same concerns about the growth and the development, and it is a trickle-down effect that now the school has to deal with this rezoning because of overcrowding. So I just wanted to thank you for those comments, Mr. Watson.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I do have a question, Dr. Adams, just because we have talked about this so much and there's been a lot of different ins and outs talked about. I just want to, if you can articulate in approving this, what's on the agenda in terms of the what's outlined, what is it that we as Knox County Schools Board would be committing to as far as any kind of grandfathering or any kind of opportunities for people who might be affected by the zoning? I'm not necessarily asking you to speak to the map itself and how it's structured. We've had that conversation. But people, as soon as this meeting's done, people are going to start asking the question, can I get out of this? And I think it's important for us to articulate what the actual opportunity is that's being presented tonight. So,
thank you, Mr. Watson. Yes, so the proposal would be to grandfather in the rising fourth grade students or rising fifth grade students, and that does not include siblings. So that would just be the rising fifth grade students only.
Yep, thank you. And can you remind me, I know it's in here, but you're going to be able to probably say it from memory, how many students that is?
It was roughly, between all the schools, 100 students.
100 students, okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if this is a question for Dr. Reiswick or Mr. Dupler. The idea I discussed last time about giving first priority to students who are already in Hardin Valley to either transfer to stay there or to go to the new school if they were not zoned for the new school. Is that something that the board would have to put in policy? I don't recall that policy right off. Or can that be an administrative decision to do that? I'm thinking we wouldn't have to add that tonight, but I want to make sure.
Well, Madam Chair, she's okay. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Owen. So, so the problem with giving somebody first priority is that you already have at least one school, as I understand it, Hardin Valley Elementary, that's overcrowded.
Right, but first priority wouldn't guarantee them. It would just give them up to whatever our cutoff is.
Right, and that's always a concern in a transfer. The board could make a one-time proclamation along with this proposal that certain students, just like the grandfathering, clause. I mean, so the board could make that proclamation to override the existing policy, but there are going to be other consequences, which if Hardin Valley Elementary then approaches capacity again, then you'd have to cut back even if they have first priority.
Right. I'm not assuming that those who are there would necessarily get that transfer. I would just like to see them have priority over students from other schools who might be requesting.
From outside
Right.
these three schools, Ball
Right.
Camp and
To what Ms. Horn asked last, or her concern about that was that it might give parents more hope than there actually was. Just to be clear, it would only give them priority over other students who might want to transfer. It wouldn't guarantee them anything at all. So is that administrative, or is that?
That's something the board can weigh in on, but again, I mean, like you said, it's not a guarantee of anything. Yeah, so.
So we don't have to do it with this. It could be done administratively maybe, or not.
No, I mean, I think the board would have to, just like the grandfathering.
You think we do have
the
to?
The board would have to weigh in on that tonight if that's
Okay.
what this board wants. Yeah.
Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first, I wanted to just thank Mr. Watson for his comments, because I think you did really hit the nail on the head. And and I just want the public to know, the people that are affected by this zone to know that we feel their angst about this situation. So I appreciate your comments. It's so hard to have to make this kind of decision that you know is affecting people's families. And Ms. Owen, regarding your comments, you know, I think I agree with you that if there ends up being a class with 19 students and you could add one student, I agree that as a student from that area should get that spot rather than some random child from another part of town. So I think that's what we talked about before. And so, you know, that may be a question that I mean, I think if Gary thinks it needs to be in there, you know, we can make that addition, because I think that would be a good addition, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and clear about that. So I would agree that would be a good addition to add to this tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After I heard that idea last time, I wanted to know what the principal of Hardin Valley Elementary would think about that, because it's a little bit of pressure, because they have some influence in some of that from my understanding. And so I reached out to Miss Whitney, who is the principal there, and she said she would be totally good with that. Like, she likes that idea. I'm not saying we make that decision based on her comments, but I knew that she would be a part of that decision-making process, and I didn't want us to necessarily force that on her. And my specific question to her was, if we do that, do you think it's going to cause you harm from a student population standpoint? And she said, no, I think it would be fine, and I think we could manage it. So, yeah. Correct, yeah, but I wanted to make sure too, like, would she feel any sense of pressure about saying no to families that she's worked with over time, right? Like, well, no, I just can't accommodate you. And she's like, no, to the degree that I need to weigh in on those decisions, I'm happy to do that, and don't feel anything. I would not feel poorly about engaging in that.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Christie, may I? If I'm not mistaken, it would just change the way the transfer office would administer that, because it would go into the realm of an employee transfer, an employee-student transfer, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
Dr. Reiswick, would you like to weigh in on this?
I would think so. Thanks to everybody in thinking through this, because I think we definitely want to try to accommodate families. I just want to make sure we're clear in one thing. Typically, and Dr. Adams, weigh in if I'm wrong, typically transfers, the way that we set those for a school, right. So moving out of the zone, if a school has capacity, then it can take transfers up to that point. I think this could be a little tricky, because we've determined the capacity for Hardin Valley Elementary to be 1,200 students. And talking to Ms. Jacoman this year, 1,200 is what she thought she was going to get. She has 1,407. So we know we're getting exponential growth in that community. Right. So I'll just go, just again, so the public understands this too. Right. Saying 1,200 is the capacity how we would usually do a transfer. Yeah. When we say reduce it down, I don't remember the number. The reduction, I think, got us down to like 907, something like that. The reason we're doing that or proposing that is so that there's room for that growth that we know is coming. So if in turn we set the capacity back at 1,200 again, there's a good chance the school's full at 1,200 before we open again next year. So just eyes wide open, that would mean we would not be having additional space for growth that we know is coming. So if we set that, it probably would be a lesser transfer than the 1,200. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understood that we'd fill it right back up potentially again, and that's okay, but we might be back here rezoning and
based on the proposed zone, the student enrollment in August 2023 would be 907. So there's basically a roughly 300 student buffer. I don't think anybody's desire is that we fill that buffer in the first year through transfers. And I think the intent of what Ms. Owen and Ms. Horn is speaking to is to say that if we're going to allow any transfers, then we should probably give precedence to those people who actually live in that community. And I think I'm for that. I also agree. I think it does need to be probably done tonight, because what we don't want is leaving this meeting and the public still being uncertain about what the possibilities are. So.
And if I could just add to that, I just want to make sure, again, I mean, we haven't really talked about what that, I mean, our thought was 900 would be the cap. And if that'd be the case, we'd already be there. So if we allow transfers in, we just need to know, we'll just make sure that everyone understands it wouldn't be 1,200, which would be typically how we would do a transfer, because they would have capacity to go up to.
So to be clear about what you're saying, are you saying that you all have already, prior to this, the administration felt like it would close the transfer portal for this year too?
I would think potentially, so that we were making account for that future growth. So I don't want to give folks false hope.
Sure.
And again, you all can say you want to set that cap at 1,000 or do whatever we want to do. I just want to make sure people know that, you know, typically we go, what is the capacity of that building? And we take transfers up to that point, and we would be taking care of our future growth if, say, 300 people wanted to transfer.
Well,
So
I think that, I appreciate you saying that. I think that changes the calculus a little bit. I mean, if the intent was to close the transfer portal to accommodate future growth, then that really gives people false hope. If we're going to close the transfer portal, but you get a preference, you get a preference in a closed portal, that's not going to be kosher. So,
and I just like to echo what Dr. Reismick is saying, because you know, in a normal open transfer window, which according to the state, I mean, occurs each year now. I mean, you're not going to have that for these elementary schools, for one. And so even if the board rules tonight that you all want this priority, you're probably looking at just very few students. I mean, you know, the example given by Ms. Horn was, you got space for 20 in a class and there's 19. Okay, well, that's one. I mean, you know, so across the entire school, you may be looking at 5 or something like that. Right. There's not going to be a whole lot. I mean, and you correct me if it sounds like you agree, Dr. Reismick. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
And Ms. Owen, and before, I do have a question for you. So when we discussed this last month, I think we said this would only apply to students currently in this school, not necessarily all students in this zone moving forward, right? Or was that?
I think we talked about it both ways, but if we're looking at it on a space available basis, I mean, that's going to run out eventually anyway. My thinking is that there are also going to be students in that zone who want to transfer into the new school. So that would also, if we give them priority 2 into the new school, then that frees up a little space potentially,
And
or maybe not.
Are we talking about all 3 schools? I mean, Hardin Valley, and Ball Camp, and Carnes?
I was just looking at Hardin Valley, as that seems to be the issue, but I suppose we could go either way if the board prefers.
Ms.
I mean, how difficult do we want to make it?
Or did you have, I think you were next.
Those were essentially my questions.
Okay.
I'll make this motion however y'all would like it. I just need to know which words to cross out now. Would you like it for the whole zone or just for the school? Just the school and those who are there now, or for the whole zone?
I mean, I would like to see it for the whole zone.
Okay.
For the other 2 elementary schools too, so they have the same choices that Hardin Valley would have.
Okay. I need a minute, y'all need.
Yeah, I think to be fair,
Would this also be, if it's for those 3 schools, is it also going the other way if someone does want to transfer into the new school? Okay.
so you're working on a motion now, I assume, right? Dr. Adams, did you have something else?
I might be missing a word or two, but we'll see. Okay, so I'd like to amend the motion to give first priority on student transfers to students in the current 3 school zones, whether they are moving to the new school or staying in their current school on a space available basis regarding both school and grade level availability. Those numbers would be determined by the administration.
Right, and I think Dr. Adams had something.
Did I hit it all?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want the board to be clear on a few things. Number one, the building is really at 800 to 900 for capacity. the building itself. When we talk about 1,200 students in capacity, you are including learning cottages, right? And so I think that's important to share with the board, because one of Dr. Schaefnacker's biggest concerns is that specialized programs, encore, and so forth, they didn't have the space for it. And you had several teachers on moving carts. So what we're proposing, as a former building level principal, I will tell you that is God bless her for entertaining that. But what you get into in that position as a principal, now you have to decide who gets to transfer and who doesn't, and that's a very difficult decision, because number one, you have to look at the programming in the school itself, and does the other school provide that programming, and so that's an easy decision. If the answer is no, then certainly you'd welcome any student if you had the programming and the other school did not. In this particular situation, both schools have the necessary program for all students. I do have some concerns, and I'm sharing Dr. Schaefnacker's concerns, is once we go down this road, once again, the specialized programs that I'm alluding to would be eliminated once again. And so it goes beyond capacity, and Dr. Schaefnacker shared that at the last board meeting, that that is a big concern of hers. So I just think it's a slippery slope of who gets the transfer and who does not get the transfer. If we're looking at it that way, I do agree 100% that we would look at those students instead of looking outside students. But once again, we're already at capacity. So what student would get in? I don't like to give families false hope, and I do want to be very transparent. So when we have these conversations, please keep in mind we would be looking at 500 students, right? We would honestly say, okay, we would really look at 500 students, and where does that get us back to, and which is capacity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
I think there's, thanks for working on the wording. I think there's a couple other logistical concerns too. One is that although we may be saying tonight that the pool would be fairly small, it doesn't actually prevent hundreds of people from potentially asking for it, which is administrative work, right? So we would be creating work. And then also by offering it to all three schools, and I totally get the sentiment. I don't know that I've heard from anybody from the other two schools on this issue. By offering it to others and if people take advantage of it, you're actually even reducing more the potential for Hardin Valley, from folks affected from Hardin Valley, to actually be eligible for a possible transfer. Does that make sense? Because if it's all, if we're basing it on numbers and you open it more, then you're actually reducing that opportunity. Is that not correct?
I don't think so.
Are you talking about, so?
No, they can either go to the new school or the school they're in now.
Right.
They don't get to transfer to.
Like Ball Camp wouldn't go to Hardin Valley.
They don't get
Okay.
priority over everything.
That's what I want to be clear
And we
about.
already have a transfer policy in place. This doesn't change their ability to request a transfer. If there's, if they request a transfer today, if there's one seat, there's one seat. And
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
somebody
I mean-
gets that one seat. So this does nothing to expand the numbers that we would take. It doesn't do anything to say that we're going to take more transfers. All this does is say that those students who are already there would have first priority over anybody else.
Yeah, I
So
completely get the intent.
It doesn't give more numbers. It only gives first priority to this group of students over anyone else who would be attempting to transfer.
Can you read it one more time? Because I did not catch that it's just between the new school and the current. The read like it was between any of the schools is the way I heard it. Can you read it again?
Amend the motion to give first priority on student transfers to students in the current 3 school zones, whether to stay in their current school or to go to the new school on a space available basis, regarding both school and grade level availability as determined by the administration.
Thank you. I missed the new school wording. Thank you.
So I guess I have a question for you, Dr. Eiswick. So, when we talk about not giving people false hopes, and after hearing what Dr. Adams said, I'm just curious, if we have one spot and 400 people wanting it, what does that look like from, I guess, the administrative side, and what kind of process would you have to go through to determine which one student would get that spot, I guess, is my question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just doing quick math on the back of the envelope, and as Ms. Owen always says, that's never good to do math in public, but I'll try to do. So I think what we're saying, just to give a realistic picture, 907 is what we're saying is potentially would reduce the current population or the next year's population down to at Hardin Valley. There are 71 potential in this grandfathered fifth graders who could stay, which gets you up to about 980. And we're saying that capacity, and to Dr. Adams' point, the capacity of 1,200 is only 1,200 because of the portables that are there. So the actual physical building in and of itself is about 900. So even with the grandfathering, we may be potentially slightly over what the capacity of that building is, but with the portables staying there, that would give us about 200 seats. So, I mean, again, I would say just good business back to the two objectives that we were trying to do when we set the zoning up. You know, one was to relieve overcrowding, and two is to provide for some future growth. I think Mr. Snowden and Metropolitan Planning Commission made it pretty clear we're going to see 200 kids in that school before long because there's going to continue to be development. You know, if we're, again, we can move that up for those last 200 or 250 that are going to be there, and that's fine. But I think realistically, we probably wouldn't open it up to many transfers next year. So for that very reason, again, talking to Mr. Cohen, she was at 1,200 projected, and she ended up with 1,407 this year. So it could be filled back up fairly quickly. So, you know, again, I think that's just something to think about when we look through that. So I don't know how many transfers there would be, and I think you're right in making that choice on how we probably fall back to, you know, Mr. Hartzell handles that for us and how that process is done as far as application. I believe it's a random pick from there when people get that, and, you know, until they're full to capacity in most of our schools. So that's probably the process we would use to do it. It's just more a matter of what would we say that maximum is, and I would say it's probably few to none.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we would be sacrificing, or the staff would be to some extent. We would still have teachers without classrooms or on carts.
My understanding is we could be pretty quickly. I mean, I think it's one of those we probably wouldn't start there initially, but probably within a year to two. But you may add to that, Dr. Adams.
So I would say, after speaking with Dr. Schaefnacher, if we, well, thank you, Madam Chair. If we were up to, I would say, roughly 1,200 to 1,300 students, if we started out the school year, we would be right back to the same situation we're in now.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just are we going to vote on it with this added in, or are we going to vote on the Ms. Owens substitute and then move to the, how are we going to do it?
What?
Substitutes.
Ms. Coatney's checking to see if we had a second on the substitute. No. So we're still waiting on a second for the substitute motion.
Then it dies. Right.
No, but I didn't, but I could. May I? So I just want to be clear about my intention, and I think we're making this much more complicated than it needs to be, because I think we're just saying that Mr. Hartzell, if somebody, we know that people are going to ask for transfers because that's what they do. So he will go through his normal process. Instead of Hardin Valley, a kid that's in one of these three schools going in the lottery, which is what happens, that would not happen. They would not go in the lottery. They would be pulled out. And if Mr. Hartzell sees that there's a seat and there's a kid on that list, they would receive priority just like a teacher's kid would. Is that not correct? If there's a seat.
So just and I'm not an expert on transfers, but I just want to set the record straight. It's my understanding that what would happen is, let's say there's 5 seats, you know, and that's all there are. There's 5 classes with 19 kids. And so you got 5 seats and that's it. Then anybody with this priority that you all vote on, if you approve it, would then be in a lottery for those 5 seats, okay? So, I mean, the priority kids would still be in a lottery, but just
Okay.
among priority kids. And
Okay.
I think Dr. Reiswick's
Well,
agreeing with you.
The other thing that we may want to think about is we're thinking about, okay, this year there would be room for them, but then are we then creating another problem for next year? Because next year, but once they're granted a transfer, they're there. So I'm saying if you transfer in 5 kids this year, then next year when promotions happen to the next grade, then you could, I mean, you could create an issue then because you could get out of balance. So anyway, I like the idea of it. I'm just not sure if the school is so, back to Dr. Reiswick's point, the school is going to be overcrowded even after this happens, even after this transfer happens. So there's going to be very little hope for anybody to actually get a transfer. So I think it could offer a lot of false hope. And secondly, I think there could be unintended consequences, even though I think you brought it up and I thought it was a good idea. I totally think that it could be, but I am concerned about unintended consequences. So I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
My thinking is that we have the transfers anyway. I don't want to open up anything new. I only want the kids who are there to have priority over anybody else. So if people were going to transfer in, that could happen anyway. So it's not to give extra space, it's not to give extra kids, it's just if there's room for a transfer, if we're going to take transfers, take these kids first.
Madam Chair.
And if there's not room,
I believe I had the floor originally.
Okay. Mr. McMillan.
The more, I agree with what a lot of what Ms. Horn said, and the more we talk about it and fine tune it, the more potential danger, false hope, illusion, whatever you want to call it. So why don't we just, if that happens, that's fine. But why don't we just drop all these things as far as being a part of what the board votes on, trying to massage it, and just vote on the original plan like it was set out? That would be my thought. If you need a motion for that, I will do so.
We already have a motion for that, right? And we did not get a second for the substitute motion.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, there was a motion on the floor by Ms. Horn and seconded by Ms. Henderson to approve the zone as it was proposed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so any other discussion on that? All right, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Do you want to do a roll call vote? Okay, all right. Okay, so, yeah. Okay, so motion carries. 8 supportive, 1 against. So motion carries. Oh, you pass, okay. So, let's do a roll call.
And this motion is to approve the school zone as proposed and is attached to the agenda. Mr. Butler?
I pass.
Ms. Owen? Yes. Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Bike? Yes. Ms. Horn? Yes. Ms. Henderson? No. Mr. Triplett? Yes. Mr. McMillan? Yes. Ms. Christie?
Yes.
That is 7 yes votes, 1 no vote, and 1 pass. Mr. Butler, did you want to change your pass vote?
All right, so motion carries. So, Ms. Henderson, do we have public forum?
We do. Mr. Timothy Buss, please state your name and county of residence, and you have 3 minutes. Welcome.
We got to stop meeting like this. Right? My name is Tim Buss. I live in Knox County for 20 years this month. As a parent of a first grader, I would like to strongly urge the board to support the the proposed resolution to oppose the third grade retention law that was passed. I agree there's a problem, with reading proficiency with our students. When you have 60% projected that, or 2,600 kids that may not pass this pass-fail test, that is an issue. I wish Mr. McNally was here tonight, but retention for just one subject based on this pass-fail test, it's a blunt instrument. It's like a bludgeon to apply to families and teachers to make sure that students are proficient in reading. It really reminds me of all these tough-on-crime bills that I've seen over my 56 years on this earth. Leaders don't really know what to do. They're under pressure to do something, so they pass a law, they allocate a little money, and then they brag about how they're tough on crime. It doesn't work. The tutoring and second chance for summer school and another chance to take the test, at least that's something, okay? But let's think about it from a practical perspective. Where are you going to find enough tutors for 2,600 kids? Has anybody, it's a rhetorical question. Maybe you guys have already considered it in preparation for, enacting this law. You're having trouble finding substitutes and tutors right now. There's a lot of money in the ESSER fund to pay for it, but where are you going to get the bodies to do this, And that's to say nothing of, the effect on the kids that, some kids, they may pick it up and it'll be a good experience for them, where they, they were failing and they put in a little extra effort and they made it. It's going to be doubly depressing for the kids who don't make it the second time. So, for just doing the right thing reasons and for practical reasons, I just, like I said, I think it's a really, it's a blunt instrument. What about the next class coming in? I don't, I'm sure that the people who made this law thought that they thought it through. It would be interesting to speak with them. I really don't agree. So I think it would be better to spend more money on early education. So one last comment. I've been coming to these meetings since July, and I've heard more talk about Hardin Valley in minutia, in the weeds, than I've heard about disparities in discipline and education. Now, I'm sure you guys have talked about it before, but come on, guys. No disrespect to the Hardin Valley people, but the disparities are a much bigger issue in this county and in this society, and I'm asking you to do more about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Kim Kredich. Just state your name and county of residence.
Hi, Kim Kredich, Knox County. I'm here to hopefully take you all to the movies. I just wanted to put as positive a spin on a possible opportunity for you all to become more aware of your special education policy, which is IDEA law. There's an excellent new documentary called Forget Me Not, Inclusion in the Classrooms. It's won a bunch of awards, and it just came out October 18th. Multiple people sent me the link to the trailer, and I saw the trailer, and honestly, the trailer didn't even do justice to the impact this movie had on me. I watched it, I bought it on, whatever you do, Amazon Prime, whatever, and I watched it with my husband, and I laughed, and I cried, and I yelled, and a full range of emotions. And especially my husband, who's seen me just give my full time to being a volunteer advocate here. He knows how many IEP meetings I've gone to or more that I'm behind the scenes on, and he just couldn't believe even what he was seeing. And he said, and they're saying that and they know they're on camera. I said, yeah, this is what I do. It's no fun, but it helps kids get what they need, and it helps support parents. So I contacted the filmmakers, the distribution guy, Brian. You can sign up for licensing, because I thought, well, if there's one thing I'd love to do, at first I thought I'll have a group of friends over, so I'll be, I'll get a license for a few gatherings, as we should, to support the arts, honestly. And then I thought, he said, okay, yes, 25 or fewer, free admission. I said, well, now hold on a second. And he was great. And I said, I'd really like the school board to watch it. I'd really love to gift this to the school board. And he said, well, we don't usually do this, but you make a great case, and I'm going to send you, as long as you don't exceed 25 people, I will send you the link. I paid $100 for the license for 25 people to watch this, and I just sent, I hope I just sent it to you all on email, but you could also get your individual link for that. So I hope you watch it, and I hope it gives you a perspective from a different part of the country. Some things we're doing better, some things not so well, and I hope it moves us towards our target of including students in this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Allie ever show back up? I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much. I would love to take that opportunity.
Just
Sorry, I could not find the room.
Oh, no, it's okay. Just state your name and county of residence. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Allie Cohn, and I live in Knox County. Thank you so much for listening. I'm a mom of 3 older children, and I was also a teacher for many years prior to moving to Tennessee. I'm here in support of the resolution that was put forward by School Board member Catherine Bike. And you might wonder why someone who no longer has an elementary age child, or why someone who taught in a different state would be making public comment on this subject. And it's because this retention law is a community issue. Our schools are the heart of our neighborhoods, and our taxes support our schools and communities. When school communities are adversely affected, our entire community feels that adversity too. We all know how much school performance affects who lives where, which in turn affects funding for each school differently. And I also have lived experience of being a teacher in a state that has had a 3rd grade retention law since 2002. Imagine it's the end of the year, a very hectic time anyways, and you are told that your school is the site for 3rd grade reading camps. Teachers who normally leave their materials and supplies will now have to pack up their classrooms because someone else will be moving in for the next several weeks. With the projected number of students who will be required to attend a summer reading camp based on the current Tennessee law, there will be a need for a lot of classrooms. And the burden on the transportation system, that is already at times unreliable, will also be very intense. It often took days after the start of camp for transportation to get the kinks sorted out. And there is no time to lose when you only have 4 weeks for these camps, especially when the stakes are so high. I know Florida is not Tennessee, but I do think there is something to learn from a place that has been doing this for over 20 years and has plenty of longitudinal data to explore. The data shows definitively that white students are retained at a significantly lower rate than students of color, and there is also evidence showing that students on free or reduced breakfast and lunch are retained in major disproportion to those who are not. And let's talk about proficiency. Proficient does not mean a child can read, and approaching does not mean a child can't read. All of our children deserve to be seen holistically. Making determinations based on one section of one test is egregious and unjust. Teachers know that this does not give a clear perspective on what a student's capabilities are. This is why they continuously do formal and informal assessments all year long. They know that standardized tests alone do not accurately capture student proficiency, and this is why they work tirelessly to present materials in a diversity of ways. One size does not fit all in the classroom, and one section of one test is an inadequate measure of capability. Imagine if you were evaluated at your job based on only one section of your evaluation, and there was no other evidence to support your performance. And under this law, parents would also be rendered powerless to provide input for a major decision affecting their child. Students in Tennessee deserve more than one section of one test as the sole benchmark for retention. This is unjust for students, parents, and our entire school community and state at large. Thank you for your time and for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Caitlin Jones. State your name and county of residence. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Caitlin, and I'm from Knox County. Unfortunately, today I'm here to speak on a topic that has been a problem in our schools for years. Bullying in Knox County has been a problem since I was in school. A close friend of mine called me a little over a month ago and told me about bullying that was happening at Cedar Bluff. This was happening at the elementary school, and her daughter was even contemplating suicide over the bullying that was occurring. My friend had gone to the school administration multiple times and nothing was done. She had finally asked for her daughter to be transferred to a different school to get away from the bullies that were affecting her at her current school. She had even reached out to the regional director set up by the superintendent, and that person did nothing. I advised her to ask for an emergency IEP meeting and told her of a program that would help her daughter. Because it wasn't offered at Cedar Bluff, she would have to get the transfer. Her daughter already qualified for this program anyway. After months of bullying, she was finally transferred when other county officials became involved from other boards. There should be no reason that a parent has to jump through so many hoops and battles the school system for so long to keep their children safe. The bullies should not be the ones that are protected under these schools. Since I have found out about this with my friend, multiple other people have come forward saying that there's the same issue happening at Cedar Bluff with multiple families. I'm urging the school board and the superintendent himself to start to step up, hold the administrators and adults in these schools accountable, and make sure that there's an immediate start to work in stopping the bullying that is currently happening at Cedar Bluff Elementary. Parents should be able to trust the adults responsible for their children at school right now. Right now, that trust is broken, and I really hope that all of you do want to work to make that trust whole again. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes public forum.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. So with that, our meeting is adjourned.